Good evening, members of the board and staff. Welcome to our Board of Directors meeting for the Oakville Public Library for Thursday, June 24th, 2021. Hope everybody's doing well this evening. Madam Committee Clerk, do we have any regrets?
We have regrets from Pankaj Sardana.
Okay, thank you very much. Members of the board, do you have any declarations of pecuniary interest to declare this evening? I don't see any. Before we actually get into the meeting, I just would like to read our acknowledgement of First Nations. We acknowledge that we are meeting tonight on treaty lands rich in the history and modern traditions of Indigenous people. Halton Region and Oakville is on the traditional lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit, part of the Anishinaabe Nation that extends from the Niagara Peninsula across Hamilton, Halton, and Toronto to the Rouge River Valley. We appreciate the stewardship of the Mississaugas of the New Credit. We also recognize the enduring presence of Indigenous people on this land. And I just realized there's a typo here. It's not the Mississaugas of the New Credit, it's the Mississaugas of the Credit. So I apologize for that slight misspeaking. Members of the board, I want to draw your attention to the confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting of the board held on May 27th. They have been circulated. Would somebody like to move them, or hello, Janet, you have a question or you're moving them?
I do. Chair Knoll, I'm wondering before the meeting is over if we could have a moment of silence for the Saskatchewan children that were discovered today. I think given after reading that treaty and all that we go through as a board and the importance of our commitment to everyone, we should provide that courtesy, and I would appreciate it if we could do it.
Janet, you're absolutely right. I apologize for missing that myself. I actually just heard the news on the way over on my radio. I've been in meetings all day, and I am devastated by the new revelation. So I think it's perfectly appropriate. Let's have a moment of silence in remembrance of those young people who perished on such an untimely basis. Thank you, everyone. That was a good call out, Councillor Hazard-Thiel, and I do want to express my and our condolences to the Indigenous community on yet another revelation of such a horrible situation, and I can't even express my sadness and my disgust at what's been found and what is inevitably going to continue to be a problem for months and years to come. Excuse me. So once again, turning back to the minutes of the previous meeting of the board on May 27th, would somebody like to move that, or shall we, is there questions or comments? Are there questions or comments? I don't see any questions or comments. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as circulated? Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Bill. Any objections to the approval of the minutes? Seeing none, those are approved. We have 4 items on our consent agenda this evening. Would anybody like to separate any of those matters? I'm not seeing any separations. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda? Thank you, Janet. Seconded by Steve. Thanks. And I'll read for the sake of anybody watching this evening. The consent agenda items we're about to vote on are the list of outstanding board reports, item 4.1, 4.2, the Oakville Public Library board key agenda items, 4.3, our health and safety report, and 4.4, our customer privacy policy. Members of the board, are there any objections to the approval of the staff recommendations on those reports? Seeing none, I declare that those are approved. We have no confidential consent items this evening, and I turn your attention to our first discussion item, which is 6.1, our year-to-date financial status indicators, and who is going to lead us on that?
I will.
Okay.
Good evening, board.
Hello.
You have before you the year-to-date financial status indicators. You'll notice that it is pretty closely in line to what the board saw back in May. OPL is currently projecting estimated about a $345,000 surplus this year. the majority of which is as a result in savings of personnel because of the different restriction models that we have been in since the beginning of the year. You're also seeing some savings in utility costs as well as purchase services related to training and development as well as mileage. One thing that I did want to point out, because it's been in the last few reports, is the outstanding payments to the school board in around the cost of operating White Oaks. We have seen some great movement with that, so we're hoping to actually have that resolved in the very near future. For that, that can just be incorporated in, and we will be up to date with our payments to White Oaks. So that is basically the highlights, but happy to take questions.
Any questions for the CEO on this report? I do not see any. Would somebody like to give me a motion to receive this report, please? Moved by Bill, thank you. Seconded by Susan, thank you very much. Last call for comments or questions? Any objections to the approval? Seeing none, this is received. Moving on to 6.2, Strategic Planning Community Engagement Results Presentation, and this is a verbal presentation. It looks like there's a PowerPoint as well. Is this, Tara, you as well leading us through this?
I will introduce the intent team. So as the board is aware, OPL hired For Good Intent to complete our public consultation portion of the strategic plan. So in May and June, the intent team has been working hard, interviewing people, holding focus groups, a town hall, as well as the survey that went out. And I'm very excited for them to share their results with you tonight. So I'm going to hand it over to Ben.
Thank you, Tara. It's a real pleasure to be here. It's nice to see so many of you again. It's been a couple years. Thank you very much for inviting us to your board meeting this evening. We have a presentation. I'm going to introduce the presentation and close the presentation, and then some members of my team will walk you through the work that was done and the results that we heard. So we'll get started. If we could go to the next slide, please. This is the agenda. I'm not sure if we'll need the full 45, but we will try and stick to it as best as we can. We are just going to give you an overview of the activities that we deployed as part of this community engagement strategy. Janet will lead us through what we heard, all of the survey results and the interviews. We have some pretty exciting news about the survey, which I can't wait to share with you. Janet's going to lead us through some of the ideas that came out of it, and then I will take us through some of the themes that came out. Just go through the hard numbers, the data that we were able to extract from the process, and then go through some next steps. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. As Tara said, we were very happy to be contracted to do this community engagement work. It was done on a very optimistic timeline, and I am so happy with what we were able to accomplish just in the months of May and June. The community responded with vigor and excitement, and we were very, very pleased with the responses that we got. It was a real testament to how Oakvillians feel about OPL. We want to make sure that this work gives the strategic plan the foundation in evidence that it deserves. We did our level best to engage as many different types of Oakvillians as we could, and I think we achieved it. We really wanted to talk to folks who didn't use the library, which is always harder than a captive audience of dedicated library users, and we were able to get a significant amount of non-library users to give us their feedback. So we were very pleased with that. And like I said, May and June, we contacted residents of Oakville. We did talk to staff. We engaged local groups. We engaged town councilors and more to provide input. Next slide, please. So just to run through some of our objectives. Next slide, please. We wanted to know how we can get more people to use OPL. We wanted to know what services would engage those people, as well as asking existing library users and advocates how we could optimize their experience with the library. As always, we were just trying to get the word out, or trying to understand how we can get the word out that OPL isn't just a place to borrow books. While of course collections are still very important to the library, there is so much more going on. And it still seems in 2021, even after the pandemic, that people still really associate the library with borrowing hard books. We wanted to understand the barriers that different people have in using the library. We wanted to understand what is the most important thing, the key driver around OPL in the community. And then we just asked for ideas about what they see, residents see for the future of OPL. Next slide, please. So we wanted to understand what success looks like, and we wanted to understand how we could define this project as successful. And what we decided, what we uncovered was, we wanted to have a clear understanding of the needs and expectations of residents. We wanted to determine how best to reach as many people as possible, especially for those people who don't use the library. We wanted to know why they don't use it and how we can reach them. We wanted to understand what current users want from the library that they don't get today. And we got some really good information on that. And we wanted to identify any service gaps that we currently have. Next slide, please. We also wanted to make sure we could measure success. So we wanted to report back to you on what those metrics were. So we have documented how many surveys staff completed. We have documented how many surveys the community have completed. We looked into how many mentions we were getting in community newspapers or e-newsletters, sort of online media. We wanted to document how many workshop attendees we have, how many focus group attendees we have, and who came to the town hall. And then we wanted the sort of mass total of the amount of people engaged from various demographics. And we will get to that at the very end, but suffice to say, we were quite pleased with the numbers we scored here. Next slide, please. One of the interesting findings in this process was around the diverse and varied demographics that the library engages with, and specifically how they differ, and also how they're similar. And we will cover that today as well. And we were able to speak to every single one of this group, these different demographics: seniors, youth, adults, teens and youth, families with young children, newcomers, and also low-income Oakvillians. Next slide, please. So now I am going to turn it over to Chris, the project manager for this assignment, who will walk you through the methodology that we employed.
Thanks very much, Ben. Next slide, please. So our research was comprised of 6 areas of focus. I'm going to briefly go over them right now. So you can see how and why and in what ways we engaged with the community. So first was our research and discovery process, where we reviewed all of your background documents, publications, and research that both you have done and in some cases we have done along with you through our previous engagements with OPL. Review of other library strategic plans, as well as previous stakeholder research. We also did a community engagement piece. We had a town hall meeting, public survey, individual interviews, and focus groups. So the town hall meeting, as well as these individual interviews, were different, and Ben touched on this a little bit. Our focus groups were demographically focused, so they were specifically seniors, specifically youth, etc. We also had some in-library promotional materials. We also engaged in an internal strategy so we could find out how staff at OPL and those who work with OPL, their opinions may differ from how the rest of the community did. So we had a staff workshop and engaged in an additional staff survey. Next slide, please. We did some media engagement. So we had an Oakville Beaver article that drove some more users to the surveys, as well as some local publications. We also engaged in an influencer strategy. So this is not your classic Instagram influencers. We had interviews with prominent Oakville people, town councilors, and the like. And we asked them at the end of their interviews if they would be interested in promoting this research and driving more users to the surveys and engaging the community and letting them know that it's important, the research that we're doing, so that the strategic plan that we're engaging with can be data driven and can be based on their opinions. We also engaged the local business communities, so to incentivize folks to do the surveys online, we engaged local businesses and asked to purchase some gift cards from 5 local restaurants, which allowed the Oakville community that was going to be engaging with our surveys to have a little bit of incentive, but it also incentivized the businesses to get on board with what we were doing, and it made them want to become a little bit more of a part of what the research that we were engaging with. Next slide, please. So that's a little bit about how we went about engaging with our research, and the next slides are going to be about what we found. So I'm going to turn this over to Janet Gunn, and she's going to walk you through what Oakville had to say.
Great, thanks, Chris. So I had the pleasure of interviewing several different people about the library from all different backgrounds, demographics, and really had some really engaging, passionate conversations about library. People, you know, told me about their memories as a child going to the library, how they go there now with their children. So lots of great conversations. And what I did is we took the information that we gathered from all of this and kind of put it into 5 different categories, categories. We can kind of categorize it a little bit. So what you're going to see are some quotes from people, and just wanted to highlight that when you see a single quote from one individual, it's kind of like the best quote of the bunch. So it's a sentiment that a lot of people share, but we did decide to choose kind of like an appropriate quote sentiment that kind of reflected the views of many. So these are the categories that we're going to cover. Next slide, please. So the first thing that to talk about was the value of OPL. So many Oakville residents have this great sense of attachment to OPL. Even whether they go or not go, everybody's been touched by the library in some way. They've gone as a child, and even people who don't use the library today, they actually in our conversations thought, I should go to the library, or we talk about different services at the library and they didn't realize that was offered and they should give that another try. So definitely there's residents out there who may haven't been using it as recently, but will likely to go. So here are some of the things that people said. The libraries promote literacy. We need to keep showing kids the value and love for reading. The timing of this engagement work was very interesting because of the pandemic. And I felt in talking to different people that there was a fear that the pandemic has, it's isolated so many people and kids in general, specifically. So there was a feeling that there was going to be a gap in literacy due to the pandemic. And so this idea of literacy was a very hot topic. The library is different for everyone. It's a source of easy access information and recreation. The greatest value you get is that it is free. And that came across, it's affordable, it's free, especially in talking to people from low income families. The fact that they could take their children to the library and access resources in an affordable, accessible way is fantastic. And I also wanted to reinforce that there was a lot of sentiments that the library is a safe place, free of discrimination, free of judgment. Everyone felt that it was a very welcoming, very inclusive place. And that was a very, very great message to hear. Next slide, please. This is just one of the sentiments that came across. Again, the library is free and affordable. When Iroquois opened, I had no idea. We need to shout it from the rooftops. It's the best kept secret in Oakville. So many people think there's so many bright spots about the different branches in Oakville, and this idea of it's the best kept secret has come across again and again. Next slide, please. Here's some data, and I know Ben's going to go through data later, but we have sprinkled some through. But you can see how often do you use the library. It's extraordinary to see at least once a week, 43.9% are using the library monthly basis, at least once a month, a few times a year. Daily, 7.9%. I thought those numbers were quite strong to show that it's an amazing resource for the community. Next slide, please. This is another what I call a hot topic, OPL being an experience. Often people would say that, the library is more than just a place that houses books now. Back when I was young, it was a place that housed books, and we would go and it was quiet, and you had to have, you'd work there, you'd get your studying done, you'd do your research, and you'd be on your way. But now, obviously, that has changed. It is very much a community hub. It's a safe place. It's a place that people want to experience as an event or as a thing to do. As this person here says, they want to go there if it is an experience and not just something they should do or have to do. We want people to go because they want to go, because it's something fun, it's something meaningful, and it's going to be part of their evening, maybe as a family or with a group of friends. But they do have this idea of having it as an experience rather than just a thing that they need to do. Next, please. Next slide, please. Programs and services. So everybody is very keen to take advantage of all the different programs and services. What we did learn, and I thought this was a very interesting quote that stands out in my mind. A lot of people feel that the library is just about reading. And someone said to me, the library is not just about reading. The library is about learning. So to me, it felt like there was a very big shift from people who are going to take out books and just reading to about learning. And so the idea of the programs and services, all of the ideas, which you're going to see in the next slides, they all seem to gravitate towards learning something, not just reading, but actually learning something. Next slide, please. So here's some data as well. You can see that 27.5% are still going to borrow items. And the idea of borrowing items now has grown so much. I had a lot of conversations with people about not just borrowing books, but video and journals and different online resources. And the pandemic has really changed how people use the library over this past year. We talked so much about accessing online resources. There was a lot of great feedback on how well OPL has handled the pandemic. I believe so many of the demographics, especially seniors, have discovered new things about the library, and specifically new things about technology that they didn't know existed before. So that was really positive to hear. I was surprised kids and family programs wasn't higher on this data, because there was so many people who spoke so highly of the kids and families programs as a real highlight of the library. But again, borrowing items is still number one. Obviously, events are very important. I think that speaks to the idea of it being an experience. And then the quiet space is also very prominent. And there is a sentiment that's coming across that people are looking to the library perhaps for that quiet space even more, with people who are working from home now. And they may need to rely on the library when they're able to get away from the house and find that quiet space to work. So that could be a new trend. Next slide, please. So what programs you would like to see? You'll see by these examples here that, again, it's that shift from just about reading to about learning. People, we had so many suggestions. People want to learn about musical instruments and gardening and how food is grown. Life skills is a huge focus. DIY projects. People are looking to do pottery. They want to do things that bring people together. there was this real need for connections and meeting people, and that could be, you know, also a result from the pandemic, the idea of coming together and creating this synergy together. And then there was a lot of talk about courses. Even if there are fees, people are saying that they would rather purchase them through the library than pay a private company for certain things, because they feel that they would be more, they're reluctant to pay a private company, but they would feel great about paying the library because they know it's going back into the community. The next slide, please. This is another very, very prominent statement that came across from a lot of different people about the need to focus on educating people about different cultures, including Indigenous history, and how the library can be part of reconciliation, building knowledge, and creating good relationships. You'll see later on in the slides when we talk to our newcomer focus group that this idea of educating people about cultures is very, very prominent statement that's come across in the research. The next slide, please. How OPL should approach programming. So part of this came up because, you know, we talked a little bit about who's not using OPL, and one of the demographics that we're finding is not using the library as prominently would be like that teenager group. It seems like when you're young and you're a small child, your parents take you to the library and it's part of your daily routine. You're out and about doing the different programs and stuff. Once they start to get to that tween age, young teenager years, they were saying that the library tends to go not as often. And so the reason why someone says hear this, and this came out across a lot, is that the library can't do it all and can't compete with a specialized interest or niche. So the idea is that as kids get older, they start to find things that they're really interested in and they go and specialize in, whether it's sports or a particular skill, you know, swimming. And so the library tends to pique the interest in certain things, but it can only go so far, so they look to other places to kind of go really deep into that specialized piece. So that was what the programming idea was about. And then this other sentiment here is really important, tailoring programming to the community. And this is based on the needs of the different branches. So we need to always ask, does our programming reflect our community? Do the branches reflect the community they're in? Do the kids' programs reflect the needs of the kids in that ward? Oakville is changing. How much does our programming change to reflect our changing community? Do our staff reflect the community? Are our staff role models? So that was a very provocative statement that came out again and again about how the branches really need to reflect the community of that branch. The next slide, please. Technology. This is a very hot topic, especially obviously with the pandemic. We talked a lot about access to technology, and there was a great number of people who said that they've had a very successful time in accessing technology through the library, very, very positive about how the library has been able to function and keep people connected through the pandemic. We talked a lot about seniors here, because of course we can't assume that everyone has access to technology. There are a lot of seniors who are not online, nor do they know how to use it. So they use the phone, and it was the idea of trying to find ways to interact with seniors in particular in different ways as one of those groups who felt that there was a lack of access to technology. And then there was also lots of ideas about a digital lending program, especially now how that would be needed more than ever with the way things are. Next slide, please. This again is the pandemic. This is a lot of comments about, again, as I said earlier, the gaps in literacy for kids, concern there, and how the library has a real role it can play in helping filling those needs and in bringing literacy up and helping children kind of find that love for reading. A lot of people spoke about how kids today may not have that same desire to go to the library and pick out a great book and sit down and read it because they've got so many other things that entice them with their devices and their gaming. So how can we really try to get the joy back into people for reading? However, the pandemic has, as this person says, has empowered and pushed people to use technology. And so COVID is a jumping off point for helping people get online. A lot of seniors have gone online, and you'll see later on, Ben's going to take you through some of the focus group work. We don't want to underestimate the seniors because they are quite savvy with their technology and are actually looking for more. Next slide, please. This came across from both the people we interviewed as well as staff. And this is the idea of that hybrid model. I did speak to a person with a disability who's finding that the library in this virtual world is much more convenient for her. She's somebody who can't deal with crowds too much, has some accessibility issues. So the idea of being able to access services virtually, or she was a participant in our town hall, being part of virtual events, has made her feel much more included in the library space. So the idea of this sentiment here is giving people the choice in going to kind of like that hybrid model when the pandemic allows us to get together in larger ways, so that people have the choice to go in person or they have the choice of doing things virtually. Next slide, please. Marketing promotion. We know you do a lot of marketing and promotions. We know that, we've been to the branches, we see the posters, we see, things on social media all the time. But there are always comments, it seems, about, they need to do more and they need to push things out to target audiences. And there's still people in the town who don't know what OPL can offer them. One of the ideas that came out is that they're thinking that it would be wonderful if the CEO could have a town hall every few months to let the community know the status of the strategic plan. They were certainly very interested to know about the strategic plan. They were happy to be part of the process, and they definitely want to be heard, and they want OPL to report back. So that kind of led to, wouldn't it be great if the CEO could have a town hall every few months to let us know what's new at the library and what's going on. And can Tara be part of Oakville Belongs as well? So they definitely are interested in OPL reaching out as much as possible and targeting marketing campaigns to specific audiences to help people keep in touch with what's new at the library. Next slide, please. Again, with marketing and promotions, there's still this misconception that the library is this quiet place with an old, stern library with glasses who's shushing everybody, and this needs to change. Again, everyone sees OPL as this experience that needs to, be promoted more and more, so that this misconception will go away. Next slide, please. New ideas where we can improve. Next slide. Okay, so one of the areas was collections, broadening collections, and so the ideas here were for gaming, more ESL resources. A lot of people mentioned more offerings in other languages. One was French that came out more and more, saying that the French collection is a bit slight. And that could be increased, but it wasn't just French, it was for more offerings in other languages. For instance, somebody had mentioned German, and wouldn't it be great if the Hardy Boys collection or classic novels like that could be in different languages to help people who are new to Canada or new to Oakville whose first language is not English to be able to read these novels in their own language. And then there was we spoke to a lot of people who, who are really academic, pursuing masters, PhDs, and the academic resources of journals, JSTOR, university training, all of these were very, very high up on their priority list as well. Next slide. Library hours. You know, everyone goes right to the nitty gritty, and the library hours came up. 9 to 5 is when people work, which means that those who have traditional work hours aren't able to get to the library at all when it's open. There was talk about the community centers are busy until 9. Everyone seems to, you know, for the majority, most people love the fact that the library is close to the community center. That's a very convenient thing for access. So, you know, a parent can take their child to go swimming at the community center or whatever activity, can go over to the library at the same time. As that, you know, once the swimming is over, then they can all go home together as a family. That convenience of that hub idea is very popular. So the idea is that the community centers are busy until 9. So wouldn't it be great if the library was open later as well? And weekends, more hours on weekends was the other suggestion. Next slide, please. New initiatives. This is about events and activities. It seemed like everybody was ready to just get on back outside again and engage with people. So the idea of these storybook walks in the park, any events they think that OPL should be involved in, and they see the benefit of OPL partnering with more groups and organizations and companies throughout Oakville to drive more business and to strengthen ties. And I believe that comment was also very much linked to sponsorship ideas and fundraising activities, feeling that if Oakville could drive more sponsorship dollars or some fundraising dollars, that could feed back into the library to help with collections and help with everything that they would like to do. Next slide, please. Themes. This is where I will pass it over to Ben.
Thank you, Janet. Okay, so a big part of the work that Janet and our team were doing was to look for these themes that everyone could agree on across the various different demographics that we spoke to. There certainly were some themes that occurred, and there were some diverse opinions that occurred. So that was obviously very important to us, and we'll try and summarize them here. All groups agreed that making a visit to OPL should be an experience rather than a transaction. But there certainly are variances between demographics about what is important, and that will prove a thinking point for the strategic planning process. Next slide, please. So starting with seniors, we did talk to quite a few seniors, and there were some interesting themes that came out. These are the top 3 that they spoke to: wanting access to technology and getting help with it. And the theme was that sort of don't underestimate us. We may want help with technology, we want access with technology, but don't think that we can't do it, because we can. We just need someone to show us. And so that was something that came through. They want a little bit of extra support, but there is a real desire to use technology and be adept at it. So that one came through very clearly. Something very near and dear to my heart is a bookmobile. I grew up in rural England, and my access to libraries was through a bookmobile. And so that was interesting that one came up. We heard how fondly seniors remember the bookmobile, and they sort of liked how it fit in with their schedule and their lifestyle. And then this one was very interesting to me because, as some of you on the board know, Intent does a lot of work with libraries, and over the past 7 or 8 years, we've been working quite hard with our library clients to sort of eliminate this idea of the shushing librarian. But seniors told us how much they appreciated quiet zones, and they didn't say that they wanted quiet libraries. They understood the importance of vibrancy in a library, but they really did want sort of a division between quiet reading spaces and then event spaces, or maybe places where teenagers gather. So that was an interesting revelation for us. That came up multiple times. Next slide, please. Newcomers. We spoke to quite a few newcomers, and of course, Oakville is a growing community, particularly in the north end of Oakville. And what they told us was they would like representation. They told us that the library is a safe, inclusive space, and to continue to make sure that various cultures are highlighted on the rack. I think they felt that Oakville Public Library does do a good job of this, but they didn't want to not focus on it. They want us to continue to make sure that we highlight Black History Month. We talk about anti-racism, and of course, with everything in the news at the moment with Indigenous cultures and First Nations cultures, that is, of course, very, very important and appropriate. A big thing for newcomers was this idea of the library being free. And as Canadians, even long-term new Canadians like myself, we all assume that public libraries are free, and we don't necessarily think that that's a message that we have to communicate strongly. But to newcomers, we do, because where they come from, many times libraries aren't free. We have a couple of staff members with Filipino heritage at Intent, and libraries aren't free there. And so it's very important to let newcomers know that the library is safe, inclusive, and free for everyone. And then we heard talk around skills building, so ESL classes, life skill courses, local history, Canadian history, maybe help with sort of citizenship type tests, which again I've sat, and any help is much appreciated. So that was interesting to know that they want it, but also and of course that is offered at Oakville Public Library, but making sure that's communicated and it's clear to newcomers. Next slide, please. So youth is obviously a big theme. There's a big audience for us, and they told us that they wanted mentorship. So they wanted to get consistent help from community members, especially youth that don't have a great support network. They felt like the library could be a place that they went to get help from people who are older than them, who have more lived experiences from them, and maybe look to them for some mentorship. This one was very interesting. So this idea of competing with technology. So many young people, almost all, but not all, we know that from some of the challenges with online school, but most youngsters are online. They have unlimited data. They maybe feel like the technological offering at the library isn't as compelling as maybe some of our other audiences do, because they already think they have everything at their fingertips. So I think the question for us as a library is to understand where the gaps are, understand what services, what programs, what incentives can we offer, both with offline activities, but also with helping online activities for youngsters. We find that young people are very good at doing what they do online, and then terrible at what they don't do online. So sort of analyzing where those gaps are and filling those gaps. And then life skills, things that maybe they don't learn in school. So taxes, finance, general life skills, help with university and college applications. How do I build a resume? Toastmasters, public speaking, those types of things that they don't get from high school, that maybe the library could help them with. And next slide, please. So key themes. So these were, reading across the different demographics and the different folks we talked to and trying to sort of parse some of the things they told us. These are the themes that we heard. Certainly the library as an experience, so a place to go to, programs, events, services. Back to that idea that we talked about in the branding process of OPL as being a community hub, a place to come together. Technology came up a lot. Having access to and instruction on technology and filling gaps in technology. I think when we look at all of our demographics, whether it's seniors, newcomers, youth, young parents, all of those demographics are competent in the ways that they already use technology. So maybe old people, seniors use their iPads extensively for quite a few different tasks, and they're good at it. So what aren't they good at? And then sort of the polar opposite. The young people, what are they good at and where are the gaps? So this idea of filling in some technology gaps, I think, is very interesting. And then, of course, promoting literacy is always a theme. Promoting reading, promoting the idea of the love of reading, and how we can engage children and their families to focus on reading and literacy, whether that's books, whether that's digital media, whether that's programming, whether that's coming together for story time. This idea of literacy is a key one. Next slide, please. So themes across all demographics. For teens, how do we increase interaction with youth? And more than just teens, but in terms of programming, how can we really look at the things that these different demographics told us and provide a response in our strategic plan? How can we fill those gaps? How can we talk about hours, services, programs, the way that we interact with them? How can we get teens and the people of Oakville to see the library as a place they want to go? Then we also got a real feeling of how we encourage partnerships. Oakville is a vibrant community with strong businesses, a strong town council, a very engaged local community on social media. How can we promote partnerships, and so that we can be present where people go in Oakville already? So whether it's the hockey rink or one of the businesses downtown, or various community events, how can Oakville Public Library always be there? Was something that we heard specifically from our library advocates, the people who love the library. They're very proud of it and they want to see OPL everywhere. And so that was a theme that we heard as well. Next slide, please. So just to review some of the data points, because I know that was important for the board to understand some of these points. So next slide, please. So these metrics, we had 80 staff complete surveys, which is a lot. That's a lot of staff members to participate in the survey process. But one of the most important statistics, and something we are very, very proud of, is that we had 2,600 respondents from the community, far more than Toronto Public Library. And so that was sort of a benchmark that we really wanted to beat. A city of 3 million people, we had more people engage with your survey than they did. So we were very pleased with that. We had 15 mentions in community newspapers or e-newsletters. We had more than 100 people attend the workshops, the focus groups, and the town hall combined. So really quite a lot. And then from the various demographics at the workshops, we had we weren't able to pass the survey data because it's such a large number. But from our workshops, we had over 30 seniors, 15 youth, 15 new Canadians, and 25 prominent Oakville residents. So we are confident that the results of this exercise do reflect a very diverse amount of Oakvillians, and that was very important to us at the onset of this project. Next slide, please. We still found that the vast majority of people who engaged with us were Oakville Public Library users to various extents. That's natural, but we did have slightly more than an eighth of respondents had nothing to do with the library, so we did get some insights there. Next slide, please. These are just a selection of the postal codes to give you a sense of the geography. Next slide, please. We asked them how satisfied they were with OPL, and you can see that we had close to 90% were either somewhat satisfied or very satisfied with OPL. So you are doing a good job. We just need to make sure we continue that and continue to grow that. Next slide, please. So summary and next steps. Next slide, please. So just a very, very important point that I neglected to mention at the beginning of the presentation is that we are working on a full comprehensive report. CEO Tara Wong has seen a draft of that report. We will continue to finish it up after tonight's meeting. besides that, we do recommend that the board take some time to review this presentation and consider any feedback or recommendations or any questions that you might have. We do feel that it's very important that the library re-engages the folks who participated in the focus groups, the interviews, and the workshops. Obviously, maybe not the 2,600 survey respondents, but the people who took time out of their day to attend one of our sessions, and test and validate the strategic plan recommendations just to make sure that what we're recommending aligns with what they told us through this process. And we feel that the more that we engage with those folks, the more we'll continue to build the momentum and interest in the library as we hopefully come out of this pandemic. So that's true for those using the library now, but we want to make sure that we keep engaging new library users. Personally, I found some of the findings around hours to be very important, accessibility. Some folks told us, they felt like maybe some staff were just more focused on scanning barcodes than providing service. That may or may not be fair, I'm not sure. But certainly provide reframing ourselves as service providers rather than collections processors, I think is always an important point going forward. And something that we see across all library systems is this idea of how do we engage the 21 to 45, 50 set? When we lose them after they finish university, maybe they come back online a bit when they have young kids. But how do we continue to grow that market is very, very important. And I think there's some really good recommendations in this process in how we can do that. And again, we'll have more detail on that in the final report. And next slide, please. And so that is the end of our presentation today. That is sort of a very high-level summary of everything we've done over the last 3 months with your community. And now we'll finish and turn it over for any questions or discussion.
So thank you for that presentation. Members of the board, has that elicited any thoughts for questions or discussion? Okay, Janet.
Thank you very much for that presentation and for the hard work to try and get so many people to participate. A couple questions on the quotes. Is there a way for you to, without obviously naming names, help us understand what came from staff versus what came from the general public? Because there's a flavor that was starting to come through, and I was wondering, is that something from our internal stakeholders or versus maybe the general public?
Yes, I'd be able to identify that. We can go through the report and indicate which are staff and which are community quite easily.
Okay, thank you for that. The other was just from a data perspective, and it might have been just my internet was cutting in and out. Are we going to? I saw the postal code piece. Are we going to get the data broken down between staff, public? Are you able to break it out a bit in terms of how the aggregate within those separate groups, and then seniors, youth? Do you have that ability in the summary of the data?
So the postal codes that you saw, those were only coming from the public survey, and to be honest with you, that was the data set that you saw was actually a little bit of a pared down version. There was many more, ones and twos that have come from various different postal codes. What we can do, so as part of the report, as an addendum to the report, we'll also be giving you all of the data in all of its component parts. We may be able to break down postal codes and demographics, though I'm not sure the technology that we used has the ability to segment it that way. But we can definitely look into it and see whether or not we can break down postal codes and demographics sort of in one comprehensive chart or list.
Well, depending on what's doable, I just think it would be help us with our analysis of where do we focus our energy. And I guess my last question is that 1/8 or whatever the rounded number is, that we're not necessarily OPL users right now. Are you able to segment out their feedback more specifically, so we have maybe a more intimate understanding of that group?
I'm almost 100% certain that yes, that we can do that, because it's 15%. It was 85 and 15% users versus non. And I'm fairly confident we can pretty easily break down a breakdown of just users and non-users and their responses.
And I misspoke. I do have one other question. So you referenced that you did have done work with other libraries of a similar nature. Are you able to give us benchmark data that would benefit the board around challenges they have versus what you identified as themes for us?
No, that is not the type of engagement we've done with other libraries, so we don't have hard data that way with other communities.
Okay. Do you have thematic data that says these are systemic challenges that are being experienced by libraries that we've worked with? These are ones that are more unique to Oakville?
No.
Okay.
No,
Thought
we
I'd
don't.
ask.
No, and it would be not honest to say that we do. We have the data that we have from working with other library systems would be demographic data. For instance, how does the populace of Barrie compare to Oakville? How does the populace of Vaughan compare to Oakville? But it wouldn't be numerical data. It would just be sort of like just in speaking to folks. So we do see some varieties in terms of the culture of the community with which a library resides, and I will say that Oakville is a little different from most of the groups of use, probably closest to Vaughan, but still not really that close. So it would be disingenuous for us to pretend that we have that data. We don't.
Thanks, Ben, for your honesty. I appreciate it. And thanks for all your hard work. Great team effort.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Further questions? So I was going to ask a very similar question to what Councillor Hasler-Thiel asked, and I'm just asking it probably in a slightly different way. I may get exactly the same answer, I'm not sure, but do you have any anecdotal thoughts as to, in terms of differences between how respondents participated here compared to other communities? And were you surprised by anything in particular? Or is that still no?
Yes, it is sort of no. I think that it's a little unfair because we obviously worked through the branding process with Oakville Public Library, and so we had a really good contextual understanding of what the community expects from its library. We were certainly able to dive into far more detail and data with this process. But, when we worked with you on the branding project, it was clear that Oakville was quite different to, say, Kitchener or Barrie or Waterloo. Oakville is a different community. It is more affluent. It is more commuting than those communities. Maybe with the exception of Barrie. Barrie is turning into more and more of a commuter town. And so certainly there are practical, logistical differences in terms of what people's expectations are from a library. Say you live in downtown Kitchener as opposed to suburban Oakville, your expectations around what the library's role and function is somewhat different, but the programs and services are remarkably similar in terms of what is offered. So there are certainly differences. To summarize them, it would be more things like, well, in Oakville, buying materials is more of a threat to the library than, say, a lower income Kitchener community
sense.
or a lower income Barrie community. So if I was on the board, I would certainly be cognizant of the fact that most Oakvillians, if they want a book, they just buy it. Right? So whereas maybe lower income Kitchenerites or folks from Barrie, I don't know Barrians, I don't know what people from Barrie are called, would maybe have more reason to pause before they click buy on the Amazon page. Okay. So that actually works in Kitchener and Barrie's favor. So to me, if I was on the board, I'd be saying, well, if that's the case, if Oakvillians are, a lot of them, not all of them certainly, but if Oakvillians are more comfortable just purchasing collections related materials, then where do we fit? How do we fit with this community, and how do we service them in a way that is appropriate and valuable for them? Suffice to say, all of that is somewhat anecdotal. And those weren't necessarily questions that we asked during this process. During this process, we didn't compare. There were no sort of comparison questions, because I think our audience wouldn't understand that. If we said, well, if you compare yourself to other library networks, well, they would say, well, I don't use other library networks, so I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, that's what you just expressed in terms of the difference between communities and their willingness or their ability to be able to buy versus borrow. That's, it seems intuitive, but I hadn't really thought about that before. That's a very, very good point. Are there any groups that you felt were underrepresented in your research that you just weren't able to achieve the level of participation that you wanted to, that maybe somehow impacting the the overall context of your work?
I suspect I know the answer to this, but Janet is the person to answer this for sure.
Okay.
I think that we did really well representing as many different demographics as possible, specifically and especially during the pandemic. I think that if we weren't in the situation we were in, we probably would have done much more in-person kind of community outreach, perhaps in low-income areas. Perhaps we could have talked to, more seniors from senior homes and stuff, but we were really fortunate to be able to connect with a lot of representatives from the town who were actually able to help us piggyback on existing virtual focus groups that were happening or different initiatives, youth leaders. We were able to talk to a lot of people like that who were able to kind of help us reach people in a different way. So we had to go about this research probably in a new way than we would have if we weren't in the pandemic, obviously. But I think the timing of this is so ideal. And what we kept wondering throughout this process was, the information that we received in the interviews and the focus groups, is it different because of the situation that we've been living over the last, however, year and a half? If we had done this process prior to the pandemic, would the responses be different? Would the themes be different? So that was something that's interesting to think about. But I think going forward from a strategic plan point of view, it's a new world, and there's this, amazing desire for the community to come together again and feel that connection and synergy, and use technology to more to more of their ability than ever before. So the pandemic absolutely influenced both the way we went about getting information, but I think it also influenced what we heard and what we learned. Not a bad thing.
And last question, did any of the respondents say how awesome our logo is? For those of you who weren't aware, this same group designed our branding for us, so I just thought I'd throw that in. But
we did not. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we should have asked.
Everyone. Every one of them. The first question on the survey was, is it awesome or is it awesome?
Exactly, yeah. Would you rate it awesome, super awesome, or extraordinarily awesome? There you go. Yeah. We're quite proud of our branding. Thank you for that work. Members of the board will go back around the board here. My Brady Bunch look on my screen here. Are there any more questions or comments? Oh, there we go, Susan. Hello.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for that presentation. I found it very interesting and very thorough.
Thanks. Okay, members of the board, I'm looking for a motion. First of all, I want to pass on my thanks too for the work and look forward to our next steps on this this great journey to our next strategic plan. Members of the board, I need a motion to receive the presentation. Susan, thank you. Bill, also thank you. Any further comments or questions? Objections to receipt? That's received. Thank you, folks. Thank you for your presentation. Any wrap-up comments, Tara, at all on this? I should have asked you before I went to the receipt.
No, I'll cover next steps as part of the CEO update.
Okay, excellent.
Just again, how pleased we were with intense work. And I can't wait to show the board the report. I would set aside a good weekend to go through it. It looks like it's going to be quite long.
Oh, good.
But I think it's exciting when we can actually get the data and dive into it.
Joe is giggling maniacally in the audience. I'm not sure why. I'm curious what. Did he have to spend the weekend going through it? They mentioned I've seen a draft and it's comprehensive. Great. Okay, thank you very much. You folks can unzoom if you wish, or you're welcome to stay and enjoy the balance of our meeting, but we'll see you all soon. Let's move right on to the CEO's update, item 6.3.
Wonderful. Just wait until the presentation comes up. Okay, next slide. So the hot topic today is, of course, the move. Ontario is moving to step 2 as of June 30th. So just starting off with a reminder of what those 3 steps and the criteria are. Interestingly enough, I'm pretty sure I heard that we actually passed the step 3 qualifications earlier in the week, which is very exciting. Just in terms of the vaccination rollout throughout the province and the uptake. I think the last 2 days in terms of vaccinations, we've reached all new highs. So that's exciting moving forward. Next slide. So originally, when the province first announced their roadmap to reopening, these were the indicators that we were given for public libraries as the different steps. So we're currently in step 1, which was the same restrictions for us as the emergency break. So there hasn't been a significant change. However, there will be with step 2. In step 2, libraries are allowed to reopen with a 25% capacity cap. And then based on the June 30th date, if the province sticks with the 21 days, and we suspect it might be sooner, but right now we're looking at moving into step 3 on July 21st. Next slide, please. So the reopening is being planned for June 30th. We will reopen the branches. People will be able to browse the stacks. They'll be able to use the study spaces. We will open with pretty much the exact same hours we've had throughout the pandemic. The exception being White Oaks and Clearview. Now that the schools are out, it gives us better access to those facilities. So we are increasing hours in both of those facilities to add more daytime hours in throughout the week. So those will be almost a revisiting of the summer hours we used to have in the past in order to be able to allow those community members to be able to access those branches a bit more now that we're not under the restrictions that were in place with the schools. We're also, as part of step 2, moving to a 24-hour quarantine period. The board will remember that we have been under a 72-hour quarantine period for all our return materials. The province actually completely removed the quarantine period as part of step 1, but we were taking a bit of a cautious approach, just monitoring. So we'll move to 24 hours as part of step 2, and then expect to completely remove the quarantine as part of step 3, which will then enable us to begin potentially offering indoor programming, room rentals, access to more of our spaces, which right now are actually filled with the quarantine bins with that. So they kind of go hand in hand. But we are going to continue as part of step 2. Some services that will remain available will be room rentals and indoor programming. We will be doing outdoor programming throughout the summer. We've been working closely with the town for permits to be able to do outdoor story times, et cetera. So you can keep an eye out on for those. Next slide, please. So just hopping on the presentation from Intent, the next steps, and I mentioned this to the board at the May board meeting. So the next step is to work with Glenn Potier to really take all the information from the environmental scan, as well as the community engagement pieces, and really start to flesh out the initial themes all together. So the environmental scan does take into account a little bit more of those external themes, looking at Oakville, potentially seeing broader themes out in the community. So tying in maybe Oakville, but also what's happening in Halton, Ontario, Canada, and broader, and kind of bring those pieces in. And so really the plan is to meet with Glenn and form a staff group in July in order to be able to flesh those out and really kind of start gathering them into draft pillars, strategic pillars with strategic goals, and then bringing those draft pieces to the board in August, looking to hold a special board meeting in August in order to be able to review the findings and the strategic goal recommendations and to gather feedback. With the goal that the strategic plan would then look to be finalized and come to the board for approval in September. I will caution that those are some pretty tight timelines, but we're going to do our best. We will also, budget is happening simultaneously. So the good thing is now that we have the community consultation, as well as some of the environmental scan, we are looking to identify key themes and really target different areas where we may have to adapt their 2022 budget for that we have the capacity to address those in there. One of the ones that we know for sure, and it will come to no surprise, is programming, and really looking at how do we fund a hybrid model where we're both continuing to do virtual programming, in-person programming, and potentially a mix of the two moving forward. And what is that kind of impact as we move forward? I know the programming group at OPL has been working really hard on trying to figure out where the best impact is and what the best delivery method is, particularly for feedback. You know, it was really lovely to hear that virtual programming has helped not only you know, people with disabilities, as Janet highlighted, but we've also heard from parents that it makes it easier because they don't have to worry about babysitting or just having to do that, or having to like cook dinner and then run out to get a library program. Virtual programming with teens has been amazing. We haven't seen a response from teens like this in a long time. So there are definitely avenues where I think virtual programming is here to stay. There's other areas such as story time where I think in person shows more value. Kids are on screens a lot. So if we can get back to in-person story time, puppet time, and those types of programs, I think they would be better suited to that delivery method. So those are just things that we're looking at, and the information that we're getting from Intent is also very good, as well as looking at hours. We've been closed for a long time and we've had adjusted hours for a long time. So really looking at how we can adjust hours within the current envelope that we have to maybe do some of those adjustments that people are asking for, particularly on weekends and Sundays. Because those are days when people have more access. Although it is interesting to hear that people want us to be open later. And so going back to some of the information that we have of usage from 2019, 2018 and 2019, and just maybe tweaking a little bit when we go back to normal hours, which we are expecting to do probably late September, early October is when we're expecting to go back to more regular hours at this point in time. But we might do some tweaking with that, and we can continue to kind of tweak those hours as we move forward. Next slide. And of course, this is very exciting. This has been a very busy week. When the announcement came out this morning, I think we were all just recovering, particularly Joe and his team, from this launch. So we are very excited that the new OPL.ca is now live. Response so far has been very, very good. As I indicated in my update email to the board yesterday, there are some tweaks that we're still working out. However, it's not overly impacting functionality. You would have to know it was an issue. The exception to that And Jeff, you'll have to tell me whether Joe's gonna adjust that to me. There are 2 online resources that people cannot access, but they're not any of our most used, and we expect that to be fixed in the next day or 2. And it's just, again, just working with them to get the single sign-on on. And then there is an issue with Communico that is requiring them when they register for a program to enter their to log in again instead of that seamless SSO integration, but they do expect to have that fixed shortly as well. So there have been a couple little bumps, but to be expected when you launch a whole new website. But overall, I think things are going really well. Next slide. Next slide. And I don't know if any of you have taken the time, but this is what I did. I was just so excited to pull it up on my phone and have it work. It's so exciting. I mean, it seems so crazy that we haven't had a mobile friendly website, but it's such a step forward. And I'm just really excited that people are going to be able to use it wherever they are with any device that they have. Next slide. And just an update on the Glen Abbey exterior renovation. It is currently out for tender. And so when that tender process is complete, we'll have a better sense of the approved completion date, as well as the reopening. So more information to come on that. Just wanted to give the board an update that the tender is what is currently in progress. Next slide. And then to end, just an update on our story walks. We made those, we made our 2 temporary story walks that we launched as part of the town winter strategy, permanent, thanks to the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative, as well as adding in a 3rd. Was lovely to hear as part of Intent's presentation that people are really pleased to see these out. So we've already launched new stories in their permanent form at Tannery Park and Bronte Park, and we're expecting the George Savage Park either next week or the week after. Next slide, please. And this is just a picture of what that installation looks like at Bronte and Tannery, so people can then read as they go. And I think we've mentioned this before, that the intent is to switch out the stories every quarter, so that people can revisit these throughout the year and kind of enjoy the new stories. And the stories we've been really focusing on inclusive stories that represent different groups in the community that may be underrepresented. So we're quite pleased with that. And that is my CEO update for June. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Tara on her update? The app you're referring to, that's just the MyOPL app, correct? That's the same app, just now that it's I'm seeing a puzzle look from Joe when I asked that question.
No, the mobile, like the website is now mobile.
That's the website.
Oh, so you just sign into the actual website itself.
Like
Okay.
you could. No, the previous website was actually not mobile friendly. So when you clicked on the previous one, you would see just like the top like 10% of the website.
Right.
Now it's mobile friendly. So no matter what size device you're looking at, it scales it and adjusts it based on your view.
It's dynamic.
Exactly.
But what about the app, the MyOPL app? Is that still something we're supporting, or?
Yes, right now, yes. We're going to do it as the app update at the beginning of the year. There are 2, MyOPL and OPL on the go.
Yeah.
Now that the website's launched, we're going to have a look at both of them to see which one we're going to keep longer term.
Excellent. Okay, that's exciting. Members of the board, any questions for Tara? Janet? You're muted, Janet.
Sorry.
There you
Thanks, Tara, for the update, and congratulations on the launch. From a selfish perspective, do you have an idea of when in August you will be asking for a special board meeting, and how much notice will we get? Because frankly, by August, I'm taking a vacation.
Yes, well deserved for all of us. Yeah, that's one of the things that Christina and I were going to talk about the next couple days, and we're going to send out a Survey Monkey out to the board and really see what your schedule is like, and we'll kind of design it around that. I am hoping for later in August to kind of give like one of the options will definitely be if we were having a board meeting in August, that date. But we'll send out a Survey Monkey because obviously we need quorum and we want to involve as many of you as possible. So look for that. Potentially, likely actually, in my OPL update to you on Monday.
Thanks for that.
Okay. Anything further? Can I get a motion to receive the CEO's update, please? Janet and Bill, thank you very much. Any further comments or questions? Any objection to the receipt? Seeing none, that's received. There are no confidential discussion items. Under new business, members of the board, do you have any new business to bring to our attention today? I do not see any new business. The only thing, I had a question, it just escaped my mind that I wanted to ask, so perhaps I will hold it over until next time. Members of the board, I'll draw your attention to the fact that our next meeting is virtual. Hopefully, maybe the last one. I don't know, we'll see. Stay tuned. Is Thursday, July 22nd, 2021. And with that, it is time to say goodnight and to ask for motion to adjourn today's meeting. Susan and Steve, thank you very much. Any objections to adjourning? I dare you. Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you everybody for your time and attention, and we will see you next month.